The fluorescent lights of Sterling and Associates buzzed overhead as 23-year-old Keisha Williams adjusted her blazer one more time before stepping through the glass doors of Detroit's most prestigious financial consulting firm. The September morning air still carried the weight of summer humidity, and her bus ride from the east side had been longer than usual due to construction on 8 Mile Road. But she was here, on time, ready to prove herself. If you're enjoying this story of determination and courage, please hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales that show how one person can make all the difference. Keisha had spent her entire savings on 3 professional outfits from a discount store in Eastland Mall, knowing that first impressions mattered in the corporate world of downtown Detroit. Her mother, Patricia, had worked double shifts at the Ford plant for years to put Keisha through Wayne State University, where she graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. Despite her stellar academic record, this entry-level position as an administrative assistant was the only door that had opened after months of applications and rejections. The reception area gleamed with marble floors and chrome fixtures, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother in the Corktown neighborhood. Behind the polished veneer, Keisha could see the real Detroit through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the abandoned lots slowly being reclaimed by urban farmers, the mix of new developments and weathered buildings that told the story of a city rebuilding itself, brick by brick. "You must be the new girl," came a sharp voice from behind her. Keisha turned to see a middle-aged white woman in an expensive suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Nancy Morrison, office manager. You'll be working under my supervision." Nancy's eyes traveled from Keisha's carefully styled natural hair down to her discount store shoes, and Keisha could feel the judgment in that gaze. "The supply closet needs organizing. The coffee machine requires constant refilling, and these financial reports need to be copied and distributed. I trust you can handle basic tasks?" The condescension in Nancy's voice was unmistakable, but Keisha simply smiled and nodded. "Absolutely, Mrs. Morrison. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team." As the weeks passed, Keisha threw herself into every task with meticulous attention to detail. While organizing files, she couldn't help but notice patterns in the financial data that crossed her desk. Her accounting background made her naturally analytical, and she found herself mentally calculating figures and noting discrepancies, even during mundane tasks like photocopying. The office environment was challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated. During lunch breaks, conversations would stop when she approached. Colleagues would speak slowly to her as if she couldn't understand complex concepts, despite her having graduated with honors. When she offered suggestions during meetings, they were either ignored or later credited to someone else. "Keisha, stick to what you know," Nancy would say whenever she tried to contribute to financial discussions. "You're here to support, not to think." The breaking point came on a cold October morning when Keisha was organizing quarterly reports in the conference room. As she stacked the documents, her trained eye caught something alarming: expense reports showing payments to vendors that didn't exist, and revenue projections that seemed artificially inflated. The numbers didn't add up, and her instincts told her this wasn't just a clerical error. She spent her lunch break in the empty office, carefully reviewing the documents. The pattern became clearer: systematic financial manipulation that could indicate embezzlement or fraud. This was serious, the kind of thing that could destroy not just the company's reputation, but potentially harm their clients' investments. That afternoon, she approached Nancy with her concerns. "Mrs. Morrison, I noticed some irregularities in the quarterly reports that I think someone should review." Nancy barely looked up from her computer. "Keisha, you're paid to file papers and answer phones, not to analyze financial reports. These documents have been reviewed by people with actual qualifications. But I have an accounting degree, and these numbers—" "Listen carefully," Nancy interrupted, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You are just an assistant. Your job is to stay quiet and do what you're told. If you can't handle that, there are plenty of other people who would love to have your position." The dismissal stung, but Keisha knew she couldn't let this go. That evening, on the bus ride back to Corktown, she thought about her mother's words. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, baby, but it's always necessary." The next morning, Keisha arrived early and made copies of the concerning documents, carefully noting page numbers and dates. She researched the vendor names online, finding that several didn't have legitimate business addresses. The deeper she dug during her breaks and lunch hours, the more alarming the picture became. When she tried to bring her findings to Nancy again, the response was even more hostile. "I'm warning you for the last time, Keisha. Stop overstepping your boundaries. You're making people uncomfortable with all this unnecessary attention to things that don't concern you." But Keisha had grown up in Detroit, in a community where people looked out for each other and spoke up when something wasn't right. Her mother hadn't worked those double shifts, and her teachers hadn't pushed her to excel, just so she could stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. She decided to bypass Nancy entirely and requested a meeting with Mr. Sterling himself, the company's founder and CEO. Robert Sterling was a Detroit native who had built his firm from nothing, and Keisha hoped he would listen to reason. The meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Keisha spent the entire week organizing her evidence, creating a clear presentation that laid out the discrepancies she had found. She practiced her presentation in the mirror at home, knowing she would only get one chance to make her case. When Friday arrived, she walked into Sterling's office with her carefully prepared folder. The corner office overlooked the Detroit River, and she could see Windsor, Canada, across the water. Sterling, a man in his 60s with graying temples, gestured for her to sit. "Nancy tells me you've been asking a lot of questions about financial reports," he began, his tone neutral but not unkind. "She's concerned that you might be confused about your role here." Keisha took a deep breath. "Mr. Sterling, I understand my position, but I've discovered something that I believe requires immediate attention. I've found evidence of systematic financial irregularities that could indicate fraud." She opened her folder and began laying out the evidence methodically. Sterling's expression shifted from skeptical to concerned as she walked through her findings. She showed him the phantom vendors, the inflated projections, and the pattern of discrepancies that painted a clear picture of financial manipulation. "These aren't random errors, sir. Someone has been systematically manipulating our financial reports, and if this continues, it could not only destroy the company's reputation, but also expose us to serious legal liability." Sterling studied the documents for several long minutes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated he was taking her concerns seriously. Finally, he looked up at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Keisha, this is incredibly thorough work. How long have you been tracking these patterns?" "About 3 weeks, sir. I noticed the first discrepancies while organizing files, and I've been documenting everything during my personal time." Sterling leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "You realize what you're alleging here? If you're right, this suggests someone in our senior financial team is committing fraud." "Yes, sir. I understand the seriousness of the situation, which is why I felt I had to bring it to your attention, despite being told to stay quiet." The following Monday morning brought an atmosphere of tension to the Sterling and Associates offices. Word had spread that there would be a comprehensive financial audit, and Keisha could feel hostile stares from several colleagues who suspected her involvement in triggering the investigation. Nancy called her into a private meeting room, her face flushed with anger. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you've made a serious mistake. When this audit shows that you're wrong, you can expect to face consequences for disrupting this office and wasting everyone's time." But Keisha had done her homework thoroughly. When the external auditors arrived and began their investigation, they confirmed every concern she had raised and discovered even more extensive fraud than her initial analysis had revealed. The manipulation involved over $2 million in falsified transactions, orchestrated by the senior financial manager, Harold Peterson, who had been with the company for 12 years. Peterson had been systematically inflating revenue reports to cover his embezzlement of client funds, using his trusted position to manipulate the books while deflecting any scrutiny. Without Keisha's intervention, the scheme could have continued for years, eventually collapsing the entire company and destroying the retirement savings of dozens of Detroit families who had trusted Sterling and Associates with their financial futures. The revelation sent shockwaves through the office. Peterson was immediately terminated and faced criminal charges, while several other employees who had enabled the fraud through negligence were also let go. The company barely avoided bankruptcy, saved only by Keisha's early detection of the scheme. In the aftermath, the office dynamics shifted dramatically. Colleagues who had previously dismissed or ignored Keisha now approached her with genuine respect and gratitude. The local news picked up the story, framing it as a tale of integrity and courage in Detroit's recovering business community. Sterling called Keisha into his office 2 weeks after Peterson's arrest. This time, the meeting had a very different tone. "Keisha, I owe you an apology," he began, "not just for the way you were treated, but for not recognizing your value from the beginning. Your attention to detail and analytical skills saved this company and protected our clients' investments." He paused, looking out at the Detroit skyline. "I'm offering you a position as a junior financial analyst with a salary that reflects your actual contribution to this company. Additionally, I want you to lead our new internal audit protocols to ensure something like this never happens again." The promotion meant not just financial stability for her family, but validation of everything her mother had sacrificed for her education. It was proof that excellence and integrity could overcome prejudice and dismissal. 3 months later, Keisha had transformed the company's financial oversight procedures, implementing systems that would detect irregularities much earlier. Her mother attended the office Christmas party as Keisha's guest, wearing her best dress and beaming with pride as colleagues praised her daughter's work. Standing by the windows overlooking downtown Detroit, watching the city lights reflect off the river, Keisha reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The challenges weren't over. She still faced subtle forms of discrimination and had to work twice as hard to prove herself. But she had learned that her voice mattered, regardless of what others thought her place should be. Nancy Morrison had been reassigned to a different department, and their interactions were now limited to brief professional exchanges. The woman who had once told Keisha to stay quiet now had to acknowledge the assistant who had become an analyst, the young black woman from the East Side who had saved the company through her refusal to remain silent. Her younger brother Jerome was now a sophomore at Wayne State, inspired by his sister's example to pursue his own dreams in engineering. Her mother Patricia had been able to reduce her hours at the plant, finally having some time to rest after years of exhaustion. As winter settled over Detroit, bringing the first snow to the city streets, Keisha established a mentorship program for young people from underserved communities, helping them navigate the corporate world and develop the confidence to trust their instincts and speak up when necessary. The program met every Saturday morning at a community center in Corktown, where she taught resume writing, interview skills, and most importantly, the lesson that had defined her own journey, that being told to stay quiet doesn't mean you should stop speaking truth. Her story became part of Detroit's ongoing narrative of resilience and renewal, proof that the city's strength lay not just in its industrial heritage, but in the determination of individuals who refused to accept limitations placed on them by others. Standing in her new office, with its view of the Detroit River and the Ambassador Bridge connecting two countries, Keisha understood that she had become more than just an analyst or a success story. She was living proof that intelligence, integrity, and persistence could overcome any barrier. and that sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the person everyone expects to stay quiet. The fluorescent lights no longer buzzed with the same oppressive frequency. The marble floors reflected not just the polished surface of corporate success, but the deeper truth that real achievement comes from the courage to stand up for what's right, regardless of the consequences. Her journey from dismissed assistant to respected analyst was more than a personal victory. It was a reminder that in a city built on the foundation of people who refuse to give up, the most powerful force for change often comes from those who are underestimated, overlooked, and told their voices don't matter. This story reminds us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. If Keisha's journey inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, no matter what position they hold or where they come from. Sometimes the person everyone expects to stay quiet is exactly the one who needs to speak the loudest.